put in all of these cuts to health care that were going to knock 15 million people off their health care coverage, drive up the cost for tens of millions more for their insurance. We said we're not going to be able to sign on to a budget that does that. So let's start negotiating now and roll back those cuts. And the Republicans, nothing. No negotiations, nothing. And that's where they continue to be. They don't even want to talk about it. We need some real change on behalf of the American people. We're fighting for access to health care.
I do sort of get the sense in my conversations with Republicans, though, that their posture seems to have changed, and I'm saying seems, from if there should be a negotiation on these subsidies to really when there should be a negotiation. The thing that I've continually asked is, shouldn't people have some certainty as they start on November 1st to do their open enrollment? But I think the question that I had in the aftermath of Thune floating that was, is there a risk for Democrats in looking unreasonable when an offer like that is out there and there is no specific Democratic counter? Or is there one?
Look, our counter is just sit down and negotiate right now over what health care cuts we can roll back so that people will be able to afford their health insurance, so that seniors won't get kicked out of their nursing homes, so that people who need a home health aide or a wheelchair won't lose access to that, so new mamas will be able to have their health care and their babies' health care covered. We just want to sit down and negotiate over those things. We're not looking for a show vote. We're not looking for some kind of big political thing. We're just fighting to try to protect access to health care for tens of millions of people across this country. And I think that's a righteous fight.
So then where does this end? How do you see the off-ramp happening?
I think it ends when Donald Trump tells the Republicans, okay, sit down now and negotiate. Look, they don't do anything without Donald Trump. I'm genuinely, I don't know what's happened to the Republicans in the United States Senate. It's as if they have all had their spines surgically removed. They only do what Donald Trump tells them to do. So if Donald Trump tells them to sit down and negotiate, then they will sit down and negotiate. He claims to be the deal maker. Okay. Tell your guys to sit down and work something out with the Democrats, and then it will happen.
I am sort of interested if that ends up being something that comes out of this lunch that they're doing at the White House today, because in my conversations with sources, it has been clear that Trump can come in as a linchpin, and he often does read the political tea leaves and say, okay, I think this could be good for me. I do think that's an open question of if we see that. But while we are in this shutdown posture, the White House has used it as a pretense to cut programs and jobs that they don't like. As part of those layoffs, they've gotten rid of most of the special education staffers within the Department of Education. I want to read something according to the 19th. It says more than 7 million children across the country rely on special education services that are partially funded and enforced by the federal government. And quite frankly, they don't care if Trump would deem this a Democrat program or not. So if these firings are upheld in court, what's the impact of those cuts?
Sure. So let me just say two things. First, these firings are illegal. They were illegal before the shutdown, and they are illegal after the shutdown. The shutdown gives Donald Trump no more power to lay people off en masse like this than he had before. He had no power to do this. But the second is, please observe the cruelty of what they're doing. You know, I was a special ed teacher long before I ever got into this job. And understanding what access to opportunities for those kids mean and how those kids can't wait. They need their help so they can be in a classroom. They need that wheelchair. They need that extra teacher's aid. They need the additional speech therapy. They need the extra opportunities so that they will also have a chance to succeed alongside the other kids in the classroom. And Donald Trump wants to just take that away, and the Republicans are willing to just stand by and watch him do that. That is a form of cruelty that no leader of a nation anywhere should impose on the people that he supposedly represents.
And this really has been one of the concerns as we've seen this administration go after the Department of Education repeatedly. It's the way that it's serving folks in all of these different capacities that maybe people don't immediately think of, but certainly this is one of them. You know, there's another shutdown cut, the jobs report that you've twice now demanded the White House release. You've been looking for those September jobs numbers. Have you gotten any response on that?
Nope. And keep in mind here, they have the data. It's not like we're saying bring in a whole bunch of people and let's start collecting the information and build the thing up from scratch. Nope. They have the data and they are simply refusing to release it. And look, again, the pettiness here and the way to try to break things apart. The Federal Reserve is going to have a meeting next week and they're going to have to decide interest rates. They need the most accurate jobs data to be able to do that. There are businesses who are trying to make plans. Those federal data are really important for everyone who tries to plan. And for the White House to withhold it, what, just out of pique? Or is it that they're trying to hide something? Nobody knows because they won't release the data to keep our country moving forward. You know, there was a time when Donald Trump said, America first. Well, I got to tell you, what he's doing is deliberately hurting people in this country and deliberately hurting our economy just out of what? Out of his own pique, because Democrats are actually standing up and fighting back.
If you get your hands on those, I'm very much interested when that happens. I want to get you on a few other topics before I let you go, because there's new reporting in Politico this morning on Paul Ingrassia, who's President Trump's pick to lead the Office of Special Counsel. He allegedly sent racist text messages, including one saying he has, quote, a Nazi streak. I want to say MSNBC hasn't independently verified these texts, but Ingrassia told us he's not pulling his nomination. Still, a handful of your Republican colleagues are now saying they won't support him. He's supposed to have a Thursday confirmation hearing. What does it say if that hearing still happens? Do you think it will?
You know, here's the part I think you should underline on this. It's all up to the Senate Republicans.
Yeah.
If a handful of Senate Republicans would say, I'm done with this, we are not going to confirm any more people who are not qualified, who have things in their background that are so deeply problematic, then it would stop. This is a moment when if the Republicans would stand up to Donald Trump, we could end this government shutdown. We could stop putting people in jobs for which they are not qualified. We could stop the lawlessness of Donald Trump sitting over in the White House and deciding which programs are going to be open and which programs are going to be closed and who's going to get paid and who's not going to get paid, all in ways that the only person who decides is Donald Trump. And, you know, I'm just going to say something that a lot of people said on Saturday. We don't have a king in this country. And Donald Trump doesn't get to sit over in the White House and make all of these decisions by himself. At least he doesn't get to if the Senate Republicans would grow a spine, stand up and say, we're not doing this. We are going to insist that the president follow the law, and we are going to independently evaluate every one of the presidential nominees who comes forward. All we need is a handful of Republicans to make that happen.
Yeah, and there have been moments before where their concerns have been aired, but ultimately they have voted for some of these nominees. I'm thinking specifically of Pete Hegseth, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Those are examples of moments where concern never manifested into no votes, but we'll see if this is a different moment. Before I let you go, I have one home state politics question for you, because Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton is challenging your fellow Massachusetts